Hi guys, I'm John Green and this is Crash Course US History. And today we'll be talking about the Mongols. What's that, Stan? We're talking about immigration? Dang it! So first we're gonna start off with pre-Columbian history. The era before Columbus arrived was pretty sketchy, as most tribes were involved in intertribal conflicts and wars. But around 5000 BC, nomadic hunter-gatherers and hunters settled and created settlements, which was an important step for mankind. Though America had agriculture by 5000 BC, many other parts of Southern America developed agriculture at slower rates, which makes it impossible to pinpoint when exactly agriculture was fully developed in all of America. Native American movements were hard to document, but the Sioux came from the Great Lakes to the Great Plains, and the Navajo and Apache tribes came from the southwest to the northwest. For the most part, Native Americans lived across a thin layer on the continent, meaning that there were very little densely populated cities, except for the Aztec civilization, of course. So before the Europeans arrived, there were about 8 to 10 million Native Americans living in Native America. And after the Europeans arrived, about 8 in 10 Native Americans died due to diseases such as smallpox and measles. The Europeans didn't bring only disease. The first English settlers came to Chesapeake area, now Virginia, in 1607. The land that the English settled was, of course, already inhabited by Indian tribes under the chief Wahanasuneka. And I'll remind you that mispronouncing things is my thing. The English called him Chief Powhatan, and Powhatan realized that the English were useful because they had guns, and a mutually beneficial relationship developed between the two peoples. And Native American people began to devote more time to hunting and selling furs to the English, which led to more intertribal wars and fighting between tribes. Moving on to the 19th century, immigration soared. Many Europeans came to America because they felt that there just wasn't enough room for them in Europe. And many came for new opportunities and freedom because America. The Know Nothing Party, also known as the Star-Spangled Banner Order, passed around stories that hurt immigrants, such as Irish and Catholics. However, the longer the immigrants stayed, the more the whites realized their contributions to society. Let's go to the thought bubble, Stan. The second wave of immigration came in the late 19th century. Unlike the first wave of immigration, who were mostly from Northern and Western Europe, the new immigrants were mostly from Eastern and Southern Europe, like Poland, Croatia, and Italy. So some made their own immigrant cities, like Little Poland and Little Italy, and many Jews and Irish went to NYC. Now, why did the second wave of immigrants come? Reasons included warfare and discrimination at home, but none other was as important as money. They came here because they heard of the great economic boom happening in the US, and they wanted to get in on it. Women especially liked working in the factories for the freedom the job granted. One woman, comparing her life to that of a servant, said, "Our day is 10 hours long, but when it's done, and we can do what we like with the evenings. That's what I've heard from every nice girl that's tried service. You're never sure that your soul is your own except when you're out of the house." Germans came here because they wanted to escape bad crops and revolutions in their home country, but came as a farmer and stayed as a farmer. There were also artisans that lived mostly in cities and made a life with entrepreneurship. Bismarck viewed immigration positively, saying the better it goes for us, the higher the volume of immigration. So many Germans moved to southern Manhattan that it was called Klein-Deutschland, or Little Germany, but some also moved to Midwestern cities like Cincinnati and St. Louis. Germans drank a lot, so they added to the population of great brewers, people such as Frederick Pabst, Joseph Schlicht, and Adolphus Busch. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Germans, along with Prohibition, were also against slavery. They gave us things like the Kentucky Rifle, Santa Claus, and kindergarten. That's enough about Germany now. Now on to Ireland. Ireland also went through a potato famine, and many Irish people came to America to start new lives, which was very difficult for them because we treated them poorly. Americans thought of immigrants as inferior, and they gave them lower working class jobs. How did people respond to this mass immigration? Well, one way they responded was through a resurgence of nativism. Like the Know Nothing Party, the American Protective Association prevented immigrants from raising up to high political office and discouraged people from voting for Catholics. The Immigration Law of 1882 banned criminals and paupers, and in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act banned almost all Chinese people. Other immigration acts that banned Asian ethnicities also occurred during this time, and almost all Asians were not allowed to immigrate into the United States, unless you were the Mongols. What's that, Stan? Mongols were banned too?
What's with you and Mongols?
Some laws sought to discriminate Asians in other ways, such as through literacy tests and poll taxes. However, not all Americans were against immigrants. People such as Jane Addams started the Hull House, which defended immigrants and gave them a place to stay. People such as Boss Tweed from New York City offered jobs and places to stay for immigrants in return for their votes. Now, as minorities moved around the country, people began to tackle the biggest issue the nation was facing: slavery. Abolition was the biggest reform movement of the 19th century, and the American Colonization Society wanted to ship African Americans back to Africa. Radical abolitionists were led by William Lloyd Garrison, who once burned the Constitution. William Lloyd Garrison was very against slavery, and he advocated to free all slaves. Most abolitionists lived in the North, because the North was more industrialized and the South relied on slaves because of its agrarian economy. All these differences between the North and the South eventually led to the Civil War in 1860. Oh, it's time for the mystery document? Okay, the rules are simple. I read a document and try to guess the author, and if I get it right, then I don't get shocked by their shock pen. Practically all of them were weak, small of stature, poorly clad, emaciated, and in a condition which showed that the environment surrounding them in their European homes was indeed very bad. It is for this reason that I say the class of immigrants coming to the shores of the United States at this time are not the kind of people we want as citizens in this country. It is a well-known fact that the majority of immigrants coming to this country at the present time are going into the large industrial centers instead of the agricultural centers of the United States. And when it is taken into consideration that these large centers are already crowded to the extent that there was hardly sufficiently living quarters to take care of these people, it can be readily seen that this class of people, instead of becoming servants to the communities where they go, they will become charges to be taken care of by charitable institutions. Well, this speaker is obviously against immigration, and I don't know any immigrations peoples of the time period, so I'm gonna guess James Madison? What? James V. McClint? So in the first half of the 1900s, nativist sentiment reached an all-time high. The first immigration bill passed since the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed in 1921. This Immigration Act further restricted immigration into the America and also established quotas for each type of country that the immigrants came from. The Red Scare and World War I turned Americans against foreigners because they blamed the foreigners for things such as the Great Depression. During the second half of the 1900s, immigration moved into the urban cities in the United States. This led to suburbanization and white flight, in which many white people left the big cities and moved into suburbans, which are not big cities. This led to a widening gap between the socio-economic gap between the poor and the rich, as many poor minorities were left in the cities. Nativist sentiment towards immigration during the second half of the 1900s improved as the civil rights movement went on, and many people from different countries were able to move to the Americas because of the Immigration and Nationality Acts of 1965. Crash Course is produced by Emily Lan, and our associate producer is Jennifer Wu, and our director is Andy Shin, and our fan base is thank you, and Arnold, thank you.